Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2026 continues. The future of work, meaning is the new money. Because meaning is simply the greatest motivational force on earth. But 68% of the global workforce is disengaged, leaving $9.6 trillion in productivity on the table every year. Gen Z, the canary in the coal mine, is exposing structural failures everyone else learned to ignore, rationalize, or endure. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and designing solutions that solve real problems. This podcast delivers boots-on-the-ground intelligence, real conversations with CEOs, fractional executives, coaches, and small and medium-sized business leaders navigating the same crisis, mitigating the talent hemorrhage before competitive viability disappears. We go beyond symptoms like engagement scores and wellness programs to focus on the structural failures beneath them. Frontline intelligence, actionable frameworks, hard truths. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. This is your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me this morning is Lindsay White. Lindsay is the founder of High Voltage Leadership, a seasoned HR strategist with over 20 years, helping executives, growing companies, and powerhouse women who are brilliant at what they do, but often overwhelmed by the pressure of leading people without the right tools, support, or systems in place. How many times have I heard that? Here's what Lindsay knows that most female founders discover too late. CEO does not stand for Chief Everything Officer. Brilliant women build incredible businesses while quietly burning out trying to do it all themselves. Not because they're incapable, but because no one showed them how to hire, develop people, and lead in a way that actually supports growth. Through her LPC Method, Lindsay helps female founders and small business leaders shift from founder to CEO by building leadership skills, team structure, and culture that make real growth sustainable. She brings the people-first thinking big organizations rely on and translates it for scrappy, high-achieving founders in the messy middle, the ones who want to grow without losing what made their business special in the first place. No fluff, no judgment, just clear strategies, kind support, and real talk. And I am truly pleased and delighted that she has joined me here this morning. Good morning, Lindsay. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. So let me start off with my favorite question, and that is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and what were some of the influences in your early life?
That's a lovely question. So I am born and raised Albertan, so I'm from Calgary, Alberta, and my family has been in this part of the world since before the turn of the last century. That's a huge influence on me. My grandmothers, my great-grandmothers, my great-great-grandmothers were homesteaders. So I come from a very long line, a matriarchy, if you will, a long line of very powerful, independent women. And that is a deeply influential part of not only who I am, but why I do the work that I do. Women on the farm were partnerships. Women in this part of the world were some of the very first in the world to get the vote. And that is because of the work they contributed. So that's a big part of who I am. And I've also been very lucky to work for some incredible Alberta-based organizations that are some of the best in the world in terms of how they operate, and particularly their people strategies and their cultures. So it's been very influential on who I am and what I do.
That's great. And of course, Alberta has one of the most powerful female leaders currently, Premier Danielle Smith, who I enjoy listening to many times about her perspective on the future of Alberta.
Definitely has a powerful perspective.
No question. So let me ask you this, Lindsay, as we start off. You've spent 20 years in HR and leadership development, but you say it's never been about HR. It's about navigating the messy human side of growth. What's the messy part that no one prepares founders for?
Yeah. The messy part, I think, comes at that inflection point where an organization is really starting to grow. Whether that's by design, right? There's an intentional business plan, or simply because what they're delivering becomes incredibly valuable and they feel that very natural growth. Either way, there is a point at which in the organization, the founder can no longer touch all the things in the business. And that is a very messy space, not only for the business, because now the operator has to become the CEO. So you're bringing in talent to do very specific things. And also, it's a very messy place as the founder, because I've put my blood, sweat, tears, and probably most of my life savings into this damn thing. And I have to release control. I can no longer be a part of every decision. I can no longer be the smartest person in the room in certain aspects of my business. I have to relinquish that title, and that is very messy for us as an individual. Now we are being asked to be a chief executive officer, which feels incredibly grandiose. We are often moving from being a technical expert to now being in leadership. There's no boot camp for that. And now we are operating in a space where we don't have expertise. And Nelly, that feels really uncomfortable. That is the messiness.
I have heard that so many times on all my podcast guests. I think I just published number 166 the other day. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, we make them leaders and we don't give them the training. I've seen it when I was in business myself, working for organizations where you take an IT person or a computer scientist and you say, oh, wow, they're great. Those guys can code, could do just anything. And then you give them a leadership role. And I like to say they kick the football around the room trying to figure out how to pick it up, in the sense
100%.
that they just don't get it, that it's a whole different set of skills and attributes from just sitting and trying to figure out technical issues. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Oh, I see that. That's such a big part of my career corporately, like working in big matrix organizations and watching people that we've promoted because ostensibly they're an expert, they performed quite well. And now we move them into a leadership role, and we just, for the life of us, cannot figure out why these people aren't excelling. Why are they burning out? Why are they frustrated, overwhelmed, and sitting in my office sobbing, to be perfectly frank with you? Why are we doing performance management 18 months later with someone who is a 5-star human? Because we have failed them. Well, the same happens in a small business. As a female founder, I leave that environment. I decide that's garbage. I'm not staying there anymore. And women leave for 2 or 3 big reasons, right? And they decide to go out and start their own. They take their skills and expertise and they go and start their own business. And then we put them through what is a similar pattern, only this thing is deeply personal, very meaningful. And again, their life savings is often attached to it. Their retirement is at stake here. And so the stakes are higher and the burnout is bigger. And now it's a very direct line impact to families, to economies, to communities. And so it is absolutely a thing. And we don't prepare people for it. And that is exactly why I do the work that I do.
It's so very interesting to me. I spent the last 4.5 months working on a field report that I'm about ready to publish, having to do with what organizations lack in terms of hiring and keeping good people. Okay. And there are 3 factors that I've found. But here's the question I wanted to ask you, and it's a bit long. So I'm going to read the whole question and then I'm going to ask for your comeback on it. Okay. Here's something I keep coming back to. In the U.S., research shows 79% of employed Americans say they want to leave corporate and start their own business. Now, I know you're north of the border, so let me give you the Canadian numbers. The Royal Bank of Canada found that 51% of Canadians are actively considering entrepreneurship right now. And Toronto Dominion Bank survey shows that 73% of Gen Z Canadians find the idea of starting their own business appealing. So this isn't a phenomenon. This is a North American verdict on the state of the workplace.
Yes.
Lindsay, you work with female founders every day. What are you seeing in that entrepreneurial pipeline, specifically from women who are making the leap?
Yeah. It's a great question. And it's actually stats that don't particularly surprise me, and particularly that it's higher in the US. What I see is that, yes, the corporate environment has, especially in the last year, as we've had organizations that have repatriated people to the office, the sheer lack of flexibility is a dynamic that is problematic. And the Gen Zs, they have a very different value set. I'm a Gen X, and they have a very different value set than we do or boomers do. They are quite comfortable working in ambiguity. We most certainly are not. The older you get, the less flexibility you have. They also are unwilling to tolerate inflexibility. They are unwilling to tolerate things like nepotism and promotion by personality. They just absolutely won't tolerate that level of BS. So it's not surprising that that's the stat. They also are the generation that are like, okay, well, I may never own a home. Like for them, they have a great deal more equanimity about that than we do, right? Like we want our patch of green grass. They are quite comfortable. They want experiences, not stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. And we're going to see more young women. We are already, we're going to see more and more young women that are in a place where they'd rather have control in their lives than advocate that to some big multinational billion-dollar corporation that they're not interested. So I do think we're going to see more and more women leave the workplace that does not actually support them as being wives and mothers. And I mean, we start our real jobs after 5, just to be clear. We can go and start our own business and we can integrate our work and our life. Like I talk with my clients about work-life blend. It's not balance. That's not a thing. That does make sense. But we can blend the two things together, particularly if the business belongs to us. Then it's about how we want to work. Well, that's an entirely different ballgame. So I think that stat's going to go up. And I think if you take men and women separately, I bet you that stat for women accelerates.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have to tell you, it's almost as though I sent you my report and you read it. The metaphor I use in the report is that Gen Z are the canaries in the coal mine.
They sure are.
That Gen Z is... Gen Z, all these kids today, I don't get it. Gen Z's not going to put up with what the boomers put up with, what the Gen Xers put up with, or the millennials. They're, as you said, it's a beautiful way to say it. Beautiful. You said they're really good at dealing with ambiguity. I'll go find something. I could do some gig work for a while, or I could go over here and do that. So what the report says is Gen Z is not the problem. Gen Z is exposing what the rest of us put up with, what the rest of us just dealt with. Boomers, okay, we got a job. We should be grateful. Let's move along. We'll stay for 30 years, even if it kills my soul.
Right.
If it crushes my soul every day, I'll just hang with it. So I can't agree with you more. And some other statistics that I have, I think I've got them in here somewhere, talk about women in Canada who are at the forefront of creating an entrepreneurial society. I believe that we are now, I'm speaking just for the U.S. here, we are in an entrepreneurial age. There's no doubt about it. And more people are saying, just as you said, I want to keep my values. The 3 elements I talk about in the report is values alignment.
Yep.
Are my values aligned with the company? Well, maybe that's getting harder.
Yes.
Number 2 is the thing you absolutely talked about, personal agency, the ability to have your work matter. My work matters. It matters to me. It matters to my client. And the third one is growth. People want training and learning that contributes to their growth. Those are the 3 big factors, and many times overlooked by corporations in many respects. It's too hard. It's just too hard to change the behemoth we have here in the organization.
Yeah.
And
It's an
And
excuse.
it's an
It's such an excuse. It's turning the Titanic. No, it's not. It's actually human-centered. It's taking it one leader, one team, one individual at a time. Just double down. Oh, but it's such a big deal. No, you're like, just be honest. You're just not interested in the investment. Like, stop trying to kid people. It's the same thing with everybody's got to come back to the office because we collaborate better. No, you just want them working where you can see them. Stop. People are smart. Stop the BS. Honest with people about what you're doing. They can see it anyway, right? And it's not about, oh, it's turning the Titanic. It's about, we just don't want to do it. It's not strategic for us right now. If your talent doesn't matter, best of luck with that.
Yeah, I agree. And we're enraptured right now with this notion of AI, in a sense, replacing human beings. And now you see companies rehiring back the people that they laid off. Yes. So the question for me is this, and I think it's a question that remains to be answered and may find its way as a key factor in this entrepreneurial movement, and that is, will you go back to the company that just laid you off?
Yeah. I would tell you in a lot of circumstances, the answer to that is no. I found something that actually fits better for me. It has better values alignment. It allows me better flexibility to live my life. And actually, I'm making money. I don't need to go back. They disincentivized people because the roles work for the company, not for the human. Okay, well, then you best get after hiring all the robots, right? Because the humans are not. They're not going back.
Right. And again, the hype and the marketing that's going on from all the big AI players, I tell people that we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Was it Clawbot just came out 3 weeks ago, and now they just joined OpenAI yesterday or the day before.
Right.
And you sit back and say, no one saw that coming. No one knew what that was going to do. Oh, everybody's jumping on it. It's all about agents. Okay, let's see what happens. In the end, I truly believe people, in the end, I always say people are the ones that really matter. So we'll see how it all works out. I want to move on to another question. Tell me about the LPC method. What is that? Walk me and my listeners through that, if you will, and the fundamentals of that.
So the LPC methodology is a moniker to describe the work that I do and the approach that I take inside of strategic partnerships with a founder as they're growing their business. And it starts with leadership. And not just their leadership as the founder and CEO, but really individual, personalized leadership. And my philosophy is that leadership's an inside job. It starts right here. And everybody in your organization needs to feel like a leader. You talked earlier about we all want to feel like the work we do is important and adds value. Well, if we want people to feel like have ownership, we need them to feel like owners. Really finding those developmental spaces where we can work with the leader, but also work with their team on what does leadership mean to me? And how do I show up as a leader in this organization and in the work that I do? So that's the second piece, and the piece I think that gets missed so frequently in business that are scaling in particular is a strategic approach to your talent. So a people strategy. How are your people, how's your talent connected to your business plan? This is what you want to accomplish. These are the goals. These are the financial markers. How are you connecting the individual human with that piece? So what I do with my clients is walk them through a very specific process. And we go all the way back to, what are your vision? What are your mission? What are you trying to create here? What are you changing on this planet? What are your values? What are the behaviors that make those values real? What are the things that people say and do to live those values? And then what are the structures and the strategies and the processes that enable people to deliver that work in that way, exhibiting those behaviors? That's a people strategy. Absolutely a crucial lever in growing a business. And then culture. Because if you don't have a culture that people believe in, you got nothing. All of that other work is garbage. It's not worth the paper. If you don't have a place where people feel seen, heard, valued, understood, and like their work is valuable, you do not have a place where people will come and actively deliver for you. And also for my clients, like, is it a place you want to work? Because founders get the Sunday scaries too. Oh my God, I got so much work this Monday morning. I can't sleep on Sunday. Like all of us, we all have to feel like this is a place where we can deliver our best. So that's the methodology, and that's the core of the work that I do with my clients, particularly as they're trying to move from multiple 6 figures to multiple 7 figures in their business and beyond.
Yeah, superlative. I mean, you and I are like singing from the same sheet of music here.
Totally.
In fact, I'll just make 2 points and then I'd love to get your reflection on it. Number one is one of the things that I've settled on. I actually stopped talking about this, but I couldn't turn away from it. It came back and haunted me, and I'm glad it did. And that is, from the start, you have to have a clear 1-sentence mission statement. It tells people, why are we here? Why should anybody care? Why do we care? And a lot of times organizations see the mission statement as something, as an outward projection to people. Oh, this is why we're here. Love us. Come and love us together. And the answer is, well, that's okay. I get it from the branding perspective. I understand that. Okay. 1 sentence. That's all you get. 1 sentence. Everybody's got to memorize it. Everybody's got to repeat it from memory, because that becomes the mantra. That becomes what everybody believes in. And here's the other side that people lose in that. And that is, the mission statement, from my perspective, more times than not, is for the people inside the organization. The people who are working every day, who want to look up and say, that's our flag. That's what we're about. And I love being here with these people, and they're good people, and we're doing good work. The second thing is, I'm going to give you one of my phrases that I've coined 30 years ago, and I'd love to get your reflection on. You ready? Okay, here it comes. Leadership is what people do together.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that sort of dovetails with my description of culture, which is culture is how we get work done together. It's the doing of. I like how they dovetail together. They fit quite nicely. And I think the idea that that's how we're showing up for each other is really key. It also, to me, brings in some values. You didn't use the words, things like integrity, things like trust, things like kindness, togetherness. And that, I think, is really important. If you want all the horses pulling the cart in the same direction, get the horses lined up. And that's how we do that with humans. And so I actually think that's really valuable. I think people show up to work and they actually want to do a good job. Fine and large.
I agree.
Yeah, are there
Absolutely.
idiots in the world? 110%. But I think most people show up and they actually want to do the work and do pretty well every day. I think we actually are the ones that get in the way. I think our policies, our procedures, all this other garbage, I think that's the stuff that gets in the way. All you got to do is actually make it as simple and straightforward as possible and get people lined up behind something that they feel like they can believe in and they can have impact on. And actually think with some effort, but without too much trouble, they'll actually do the things and they'll do them quite well.
I absolutely agree. I think people want to be part of something special, something bigger than themselves. Now I'm going to come at you with a long question. Okay. It takes a little bit of a different turn at the end. I'm going to ask you this question. I want to ask you something that I think cuts to the heart of what you do. Okay.
Right.
We've been talking about women building their own teams, owning their futures, leaving corporate to create something on their own terms. But let's flip that lens for a second. What does this trend mean for the HR function inside large organizations? Because if the most capable, entrepreneurial-minded women are increasingly opting out of corporate structures to build their own, what does that leave behind? And what does that tell us about the long-term health of the corporate talent pipeline?
Yeah. That's such a great question. I love it. I mean, I think the answer is actually reasonably obvious, which is you're going to end up with the mediocre. Ironically, much like a unionized environment. Isn't that interesting? Our big corporate organizations that are all about capitalism are actually breeding grounds for mediocrity. Because, yeah, the smartest, the best and the brightest aren't going to stay. They're going to pack up their toys and they're going to go do their own thing. It is a problem in our talent pipeline. It absolutely is. And you just said it earlier. Our Gen Zs and our Gen Alphas are far less likely to ever engage in a corporate job. We're seeing more and more of that. I've never worked in a big organization, right? Like I've never worked in anything that had more than 250 people in it. I've worked in startups my whole career. So that presents slightly different issues as someone with an HR perspective on it. But yeah, what we're doing is we're actually incentivizing behaviors that we don't actually want. We want people in organizations to have ownership and an entrepreneurial mindset. Well, if they already have one, they pack their box and they're heading out the door because you don't actually let them operate like an entrepreneur. You don't reward that behavior. This is, again, where we get into trouble in our HR systems and in our cultures because we're actually not incentivizing the right behaviors. In fact, when we step back and look at them, we're incentivizing the wrong ones. You fit in, you do what you're told, you say yes a lot, and you get rewarded because you become a VP in the company. But actually, you're not adding VP level value. You just say the right things at the right time and you know which butts to kiss, essentially.
Yeah, I profoundly stated, and I think you're absolutely right. It leads you there. And I think there is this, I will call it a myth. I'll go so far as to call it a myth that AI will fill that blank of me, AI will keep me from, if I'm in the corporate structure right now, and I was the loudspeaker from the corporate structure, you might hear, don't worry about it. AI will keep us from mediocrity, okay, in a manner of speaking. But one thing I've come to know, I'm part of an RVA group here where I live in Richmond. It's growing exponentially in the literacy and knowledge, filtering that out into the community. And one thing I've said, and everybody goes, yeah, so AI can't fix what's culturally broken. So I think that's what people think. I'd love to get your reflection. Do you think, for example, AI can fill that bill?
Yeah, no, at least not at this point. I don't know, like you said earlier, maybe something magical happens. It's still garbage in, garbage out. Who's giving the AI the information? Now, some of it is generative. We get that. But the truth is, if the person running the company doesn't listen to the AI, what's your end result? Well, that's stupid. I'll do whatever I want. Right? Like, if all we have is people running our organizations that are in this like holographic space of groupthink, is the AI going to change? Not unless it's the CEO of the company. And if that's the case, we have a very different problem. And are we at the red pill, blue pill stage? I don't know. But really? Because the truth is, unless we're challenging ideas and thoughts, unless we're actively engaging in positive, really critical thinking and really, really crunchy conversations, doesn't matter. We're not going to listen to the AI anyways if we're not actually ready to be open-minded and growth-minded in terms of our decision-making.
Yeah, I would agree. I think so much is being lost in the translation.
100%.
Okay, this will fix it for us. We're getting rid of all these white-collar jobs. I saw a note the other day about IBM, which took me a bit by surprise, but it made perfect sense to me. And I haven't run it to ground, so I'm going to trust that what I read was right. And that is that IBM is now starting to hire Gen Zers. They're starting to bring them on. And the reason is they've come to the conclusion that 5 years from now, they won't have people in the organization who are smart and intelligent who they can rely on. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that works itself out. Very, very interesting.
I will be very curious about their turnover. Because speaking of organizations that are like turning the Titanic, are they they can hire them, incentivize them, pay them, give them all sorts of perks and benefits? I would be curious to see how many remain in 5 years. Because if you will give you all the latitude, the ownership, entrepreneurial, you can do all these things. And then within a couple years, they recognize that's not actually happening. They will leave. The turnover will be extraordinary. And what you'll be left with is people that are willing to tolerate that. Again, I just don't know, can they get their heads around that these kids are different? They show up different. They have great value to add. They're really smart and savvy. And they can sniff out bullshit at 100 yards. They're not interested in your corporate jargon. Don't give them golden handcuffs. They don't care about that. They want to express themselves, and they want to feel like the work they do has impact in their world. This is the first generation that's ever had environmental anxiety. They can't sleep at night because they're worried that we're burning their world to the ground. Like literally. They're a constant state of existential crisis. They don't care that you're going to give them 10 grand more and a 401k. That's not their value system. And that's the problem, is I'm not sure the boomers at the top can get their heads around it. Well, they just don't want to work very hard. No, they'll work hard. They just don't want to work hard for you. Like, you're the problem.
Well,
that's the situation.
They
100%.
need a reason. And like on my, I interviewed a guy who's a terrific guy named Nikhil Raval in India. And we were talking about Gen Z. And he gave me this one line that's become a moniker now for me. And that is, meaning is the new money. Meaning is the currency. What do I mean? What does this mean to me? And I think people have to, because I always say, and this started 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That changed my life.
100%.
And I always say, meaning's the single greatest motivation force on the planet. What kind of meaning making do we give folks in organizations today? It's just not there. So go ahead.
It's not there. And I guess the other point is, why aren't we listening? Like, how hard is it don't hire some big consulting company. Just get out of the 40th floor. Go down to where the work gets done. Use your ears and your mouth in the proportion they exist on your face and ask a question and listen. They will tell you what they're looking for. They'll tell you what gives them meaning every day. Just listen to them. And then give them the things that they need in order to do that. Like, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't even have to be super strategic. But
yeah,
it's really, the answer to this is actually quite simple. I think that's what makes me laugh, because all these really smart people sitting in boardrooms with all their strategies, and actually the best strategy is just open your ears and close your mouth.
Yep, I agree. Let me ask you this question as we're getting closer to the end here. So here we go. Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. This is a worldwide group that monitors entrepreneurship. Research tells us that roughly 30% of Canadian adults intend to start a business in the next 3 years. That's not a dream. That's a declared intention. And I realize we maybe get a bit redundant, but that's okay. If you could get in front of all those women before they hire their first person, the one thing you tell them.
If I had all those women in a room and they were thinking about hiring their very first person, I would say to them, before you do that, I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing right now. What are you really good at? What are you really what do you really love to do? Why did you start this business in the first place? What are you really terrible at? If you never had to do again, you would die happy. And then let's think about what's in the middle of it and who you can hire to help you do the things that are not your zone of genius. They're not your area of expertise. And in fact, you're not really very good at them. Let's figure that out, and then let's find someone to help you with those things, because that's going to take you further than hire a VA.
Right. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Do what you love. Get somebody else to do what they love.
And then let's talk about how you're going to lead, because now you're not just leading yourself, you're leading someone else. And that is an entirely different skill set and competency set. So now let's figure out what leadership is for you, so that you can show up for that human who probably has a very different outlook than you do, and you can actually maximize their contribution, that ROI to your growing business. That's
Agreed.
The strategic approach.
Yep. No complaints there. Wonderful observation. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
Lindsay, we're getting close to the end. I want to ask you one more question, and that is, where does Lindsay White go in the future? What is she looking forward to? What do you project for yourself in the next couple of years?
That's a great question. And I was just on with my own coach before we jumped on. So actually, very present for me. My mission is to be the go-to strategic partner for women who are accelerating and scaling their businesses. That is where I am taking my business. I do coaching, consulting, and then I have a program where I do a combination of that. And those are things that I'm deeply passionate about and I desire to grow. And to be that person that is at the front of the group saying, here's what you need to be thinking about. Here's how your leadership needs to evolve. Here's why a people strategy is important. Giving women entrepreneurs the right tools and the right mindset to be able to build incredible business. That's where I'm going.
That's great. Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been a wonderful time.
Thank
I'm
you.
absolutely delighted with your responses. We are coming. All roads lead to Rome. And in this
Yes.
sense, all roads lead to the future and what it means for people. So I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been a wonderful time for me. It's great to know that I'm truly not as crazy as I think I am at times.
Heavens no.
That we believe in very like-minded ideas that keep coming back over and over again with the number of guests that I've had the honor and privilege to interview on the podcast. So I want to wish you great fortune in the future, great health,
Thank
and
you.
I wish you all the best. Thank you so very much.
Thank
Today.
you, John. Thank you.
This is Dr. John D'Antico. Remember, meaning is the new money, but it requires building the structures that deliver it. If today's conversation challenged your thinking or gave you a framework worth implementing, share it with a leader who needs to hear it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit throttleupleadership.com for more resources. Until next time, keep throttling up and keep the people at the center of everything you do.